So today I want to make a blue stratagem tier list. And now, originally I wasn't sure whether or not to make this a support weapon tier list directly, because most blue stratagems are support weapons, but then I decided it'd be kind of whack to separate support weapons and backpacks and vehicles, as that's just too many, it's too many tier lists, so we're going to do all of them in one go, because all the blue stratagems, I think, can be talked about relatively at the same time. They take the same investment. It's a stratagem. It takes a stratagem slot. Not super complicated. Obviously, there's differences between backpack slots, support weapon slots, and I will account for those. But let me get into specifically why I set up the tiers the way I did. Now, of course, I'm a contrarian. I like setting up my tiers a little bit differently, so that's why I want to go over them. So S tier is going to be for things that are strictly superior to their alternatives. Does not mean S tier is overpowered. Something can be an S tier because the alternatives are just not very good. But if it is an S tier, I believe that if you want to accomplish what that thing sets out to accomplish, there's no reason to pick anything else. And that is what makes something S tier. It is just the best at its job by far. A is going to be extremely effective for weapons that are really, really solid at what they do. But there are alternatives. They are not the only weapon that does that effectively. So these weapons, you're always going to have a good time if you pick them and put them in the right loadout. If you bring, I don't know, something to take out Chaff and then try to use the heavies, obviously it's not going to be that good. Because, you know, I think support weapons are actually kind of decently balanced. Way better balanced than primaries at the very least, and way better balanced than boosters. So overall, I don't think there are any insanely overpowered blue stratagem, or any insanely overpowered support weapons especially. B is going to be moderately effective. These are weapons that are going to do, they're going to do okay. I think they're going to get you where you want to go. They're not going to be as good as the alternatives, but they're not going to be like miles and miles behind. So even though there will probably be a better option than B tier to pick for that exact same job, they will still, you know, be worth picking sometimes. They'll have one or two unique things about them that will make them a viable, well, more than a viable option, but an attractive option that you want to pick. C is going to be for weapons that are underperforming, in which they are still usable, they still can contribute to a build, but they are just not that good. They will be, either they'll miss the mark of what they want to accomplish and they won't accomplish it that well, or they won't really bring anything to the table that is worth the downsides they have. So they will be outperformed by B and A tier by quite a bit. And F tier is for support weapons I think are genuinely just not worth picking, because either they have no niche, or they are so much worse at what they're supposed to do than their alternatives that you're just throwing if you pick them. There's only a couple in this tier. I usually try and, you know, put most of my picks in the mid ranges, because I think that's the best way to do a tier list, because if you put everything in S tier, everything in F tier, then it's just going to be not that interesting, unless it's for, you know, a category of weapons like primaries, where really most of them do belong closer to the bottom. But here, this is going to be different from the primary tier list, again, because I think blue stratagems are much better balanced, and most of them have a niche of some description. So anyway, let us get right into it, and we're going to start with the sterilizer. Is this a surprise to anybody? Absolutely not. The sterilizer is just bad. It's just bad for a lot of reasons. Because one, I don't even know what this thing is supposed to do. Kind of a chaff cure, kind of a crowd control, but it is bad at both of these things. You can just bring a flamethrower and just have a way better time than if you bring the sterilizer. The sterilizer contributes nothing to a loadout, because it is the worst way to apply gas. Even though gas is a good effect, you can just take a gas grenade and get way more value than you ever would from the sterilizer. It's not good as a support weapon because it doesn't really do anything special. Like, it's less powerful than most primaries when it comes to clearing chaff in the first place. It doesn't clear heavies, it doesn't clear elites, it doesn't have any utility because it can't close buckholes, as a little bit of crowd control, but there's another gas support weapon, which we'll talk about later, which is way more effective and spreads gas way better. So even in this slot, there's just absolutely no reason to bring the sterilizer. This thing needs a complete and utter rework, and it's a meme weapon for a good reason, and it will stay a meme weapon until it receives that complete rework. For people throw around the idea of the acid rain debuff on enemies, I think that could be pretty cool. and an interesting way of using a mechanic that's not really being tapped into for its full potential right now, because it's only on one specific planet type, that planet type being ugly, running like shit, and just being not fun to play on. So I never run into the acid modifier, even though it's a cool modifier that could really make some interesting strategies and give the sterilizer quite a cool niche. But besides the point, never use the sterilizer unless you're doing a meme build. You know, that's all there is to it. So, flamethrower. I'm gonna say I hesitate in between extremely effective and moderately effective, because I do think, compared to the torture, it doesn't really offer up enough. But maybe let's not compare too much to primaries in this tier list, because the flamethrower is good. This is a tough choice. This is actually probably going to be the hardest choice of the whole tier list. I'm going to put it in extremely effective, because I do think it is extremely effective. Flamethrowers are really good for chaff clear, because they can spread the fire dot on the ground, which is a little unreliable, but still it'll catch enemies. And it can spread the fire dot to a bunch of different enemies as well. So you just flick your mouse back and forth across a bug breach, and you're going to rack up a ton of kills. And then now it also has a crowd control component, so you don't just instantly die when enemies get too close. They don't just run through the fire and thwack you in the face anymore. They actually get stopped by the fire. This thing is also pretty good against some heavies. It's not the best anti-heavy weapon, but it can take out like harvesters really well, and it can finish up soft and heavies like Bile Titans and Chargers also decently effectively. Flamethrowers are really good against bot heavies for some reason, because of how their armor works and like it penetrates through. But that's kind of a niche interaction, I think. But still, the flamethrower is a really, really solid support weapon. I still think it doesn't really differentiate itself enough from the flamethrowers, or from the torture, the flamethrower primary. So I would give it something. I'm not sure, maybe a little bit more range, maybe a little bit more damage, just a minor tweak to separate those two. Because right now it's the gap in between the torture and the cremator, and I think it's leaning a little bit too much on the torture side. But it's still definitely worth bringing, I think. It's got quite a lot of utility, and it is better in some ways. It does do significantly more damage than the torture, just not completely enough, if you ask me. But you will still not have a bad time if you bring this, and you are still not missing out if you don't have the torture and want to use the flamethrower instead. So this is still a really solid support weapon. So now moving on. The harpoon gun, honestly, I'm going to put it in moderately effective, because I do think it is pretty decent. I like the harpoon gun, but it has some pretty big flaws. So let's talk about the positives first. One, of course, it spreads gas, and gas is insanely good crowd control, and it is insanely good chaff clear. But the gas is tiny, so it is really only useful in very close quarters or in a choke point, because outside of that, you're just not going to gas that many enemies. You can gas maybe a couple, but again, it is much weaker than something like a gas grenade or the gas dog or an orbital gas strike. So the gas isn't really the main appeal of this weapon for me, because it's a hybrid weapon. It does multiple different things. It also has really good stagger, like one of the best stagger values in the game, I'm pretty sure. You can stagger a Bile Titan, you can stagger flesh mobs very uniquely, because those have crazy stagger resistance. So it is pretty good at interrupting enemies from doing some bullshit. But it is limited by the fact that it has a very, very, very slow reload rate. So your effective rate of fire with a harpoon gun is not that crazy. And while it does do decent direct damage, enough to like one-tap Hulk visors and things like that, it's still not really a good anti-tank tool. It will take a lot of spears to take out something like a Charger or a Bile Titan. Sometimes there's weak spot techs, like you can hit the Charger in the rear, and the harpoon will over-penetrate and then do damage to a bunch of different body parts, and that'll kill the Charger very quickly. But there's a couple niche interactions like that, but overall, this isn't really an anti-heavy specialist. So it's an interesting generalist, and it's a fun gun with utility as well, because it does have, demo force, so you can close bug holes and spawners and all that good stuff. So I do think it is definitely a interesting and viable weapon that has a lot of reasons to be brought out, if you ask me. It's just not the strongest thing ever, which I think is actually fine for it, because it wears so many hats that if it were too good at one specific thing, then I think it would be a little overpowered. But I wouldn't hate to see the reload rate like cut down by like 10 to 20% or something like that. Just a very minor reload speed buff. It's not necessary though. I do think this is a very viable weapon otherwise, and it's got a lot of cool utilities and cool techs. And if it's great in a full gas build, it's really good on Hive Worlds, so it's definitely got a lot of utility. So now the laser cannon, I'm also going to put it in moderately effective. Even though I do think it is one of the best picks on the squid front, it has too many flaws to put me into extremely effective. And what are those flaws? The actual DPS of the laser cannon is extremely low. It is the same as the scythe. The only difference between this thing and the scythe is that it has higher penetration, which makes a big difference, and it has higher durable damage, which also makes a big difference, but it still has insanely low DPS. Now, it can mitigate that quite a bit by hitting weak points, so on things like Hulks, on things like Harvester Eyes, it's really solid against those enemies. Not necessarily the best, but still pretty damn good. Maybe the best against Harvester specifically, but that's just due to how their weak points work. And it is really good at spreading the fire dot across a lot of enemies, but so are all laser beams. If you're bringing this thing just to spread fire on a bunch of enemies, you could bring the scythe or the dagger for a much cheaper investment and be able to do the same thing. Even, in fact, you'll do it better with the scythe, because the scythe has way more heat sink capacity, so you can laze for much longer if you have the attachments unlocked. So the laser cannon, I think it's an interesting gun, but I've said for a while, I do think all beam lasers need an alternative mode. They need the heat mode they have right now, where they set enemies on fire, and then a cutting mode, which doesn't set enemies on fire, but does way more direct DPS. So I think that should be applied to all beams, because fire modes are pretty cool. I think changing, giving weapons multiple ammunition types or multiple fire modes just makes them more interesting for build crafting and just gameplay and decision making. But overall, I do think specifically the laser cannon really does need higher direct damage than the scythe. It doesn't need that much, but it does need a little bit more. Because right now, it's kind of useless against the bugs, or the bug heavies. Like, on the bug front, I really do think you're just better off bringing the scythe if you want a laser beam. I mean, the durable damage can be helpful sometimes against, like, Alpha Commanders specifically. This is a pretty decent counter for them. But overall, it's going to take a year and a half to kill a Bile Titan with a laser cannon. It takes more than a full heat sink, which is a really long time to spend on a single Bile Titan, when there are probably 4 more barreling your way and about 10 trillion bugs spawning around you all the time. And on the bot front, it's okay at lasing weak points on things like Hulks. It's not great against Harvest, or against, what do you call them? War Striders, it's okay. But overall, it's just very, outperformed by more specialized anti-weak point weapons like the Railgun and the AMR. So I think this is a pretty decent weapon. I like it a lot because lasers are cool. But overall, I think it's just, it's missing a little something. It's close to being really good though. It's better than I used to think it was. I've come around on the laser cannon quite a bit. Like a year ago, or I don't know. Yeah, maybe about a year ago, like 10 months ago, I would probably have put it in C, but now I do think it is B, just because it is that good against the squids. Moving on, the Stalwart. This is also kind of a tough choice, but I'm going to place it moderately effective, because it is good at what it does, and that is just shitting out a ton of light pen DPS, but that is not always the most useful thing ever. Because light pen usually benefits from precision, and the Stalwart has okay-ish precision, but it doesn't have exceptional precision. So the Stalwart doesn't really work that good on the best faction for light pen, which is the bots. A lot of people are going to be mad at me for that, but no, light pen is the best on the bots because they have great weak point design across the board. And the Stalwart just doesn't shine there. It is outperformed by accurate primaries like the Diligence, like the Sensor, etc. It does have a decent niche on the squids because it's really good against Overseers, it's really good against shields, and it's pretty good against flesh mobs and footless. But obviously it's not going to take out like the squid mechs all that. Well, it can't take out the squid mechs if you shoot the pot bubble, so that's a bad example. But it's not going to take out a Harvester all that well, or a Stingray all that well. So it's still a little bit limited on that. And I think the only reason the Stalwart is moderately effective is just because projectile weapons do not work that well on the bugs. If the bugs were less durable and their dead bodies like despawned within a reasonable time frame instead of just making permanent cover for other enemies to clip through, I think this would immediately bump up to extremely effective and be a very solid chaff clear option on two fronts. But right now, I would not bring the Stalwart to the bug front very often. I mean, it is really fun to use, but the bugs just hard counter ballistic weapons just with the way their dead enemy hitboxes work. So I do think the Stalwart is still moderately effective. Like, you can bring this and it is going to be really decent in a lot of builds, which is what the B tier category is for me. It's not going to be it's not going to be the best thing ever, but it's going to be very good. So moving on, the medium machine gun. I'm going to put it in underperforming. I know this is a fan favorite for a lot of people, but I think the medium machine gun just has too many flaws and too big of flaws to ever go any higher than this. I don't think it's strictly inferior because it does have a couple things it can do that the Stalwart cannot, but I do think it is not performing where it should be right now. And why is that? So if you think the medium machine gun is good, I'm going to give you a little bit of homework, and I'm going to tell you, look up the wiki for the Stalwart and look up the wiki for the medium machine gun. The .gg is the better one, not the fandom. And then I want you to look at the stats side by side, because the Stalwart has a better rate of fire, it's got better DPS, it's got better damage per bullet, it's got better ergonomics, it's got better recoil, it's got a better ammo economy, it's got better, well, I think it's got less sway as well. And it's just better in every single category. And it also has a mobile reload, which makes a huge difference because stationary reloads are a massive negative in the game right now, where enemies are so fast and can kill you so easily. You really want to avoid standing still as much as you can on any of the fronts. On the bugs, of course, because the bugs will insta-kill you if they catch you. On the bots, because they'll ragdoll you out of the reload. And on the squids, because you're getting harassed by foeless and flesh mobs forever. So overall, the medium machine gun just has weakness after weakness after weakness after weakness after weakness just for the medium pen tag. And I don't think that medium pen tag is worth all the downsides. Now, granted, the medium pen tag does let it be useful against certain enemies, like harvesters, that the Stalwart just cannot deal with. But overall, I do think the medium machine gun is in a pretty desperate need of a buff. And that's kind of sad because it's the first weapon people unlock. It's a cool looking weapon, and it's a weapon that could be a lot of fun to use if it was balanced a little bit better. So what I would do, I would maybe speed up the stationary reload a little bit, and then I would make it at least do more damage and more durable damage per shot than the Stalwart at the bare minimum. That's what I would do, and I think this would probably jump up to moderately effective with those two changes. But right now, I really don't think it's a great weapon, unfortunately. Even though it's a cool weapon, it's a fun weapon, a lot of people like it, it's just not really where it needs to be. So continuing on, oh my god, this is such a long list, I'm going to regret doing this all in one sitting. Need a sip of water real quick, and you should too. Now, the HMG, that was a stalling sip of water because I don't really know where to put it. The HMG. I really hesitate in between underperforming and moderately effective, because it does have some good utilities against some enemies. I do think it's a good weapon against the squids, but I'm going to have to put it underperforming, I think, which is unfortunate because I like this thing a lot. But it has two crucial weaknesses, I think. The first one is that it just doesn't do enough durable damage. It just doesn't. It is firing massive 12.7mm rounds, which are HMG rounds. If you've ever seen one of those, like in person or just a picture of them, they're fucking big. And it just does not do that much durable damage, despite firing really high caliber rounds. And I think that is really what holds it back. I think it should be an effective weapon against like medium tier heavies, like just to the, like you should be able to chew through the HP of a charger pretty effectively with an HMG. Maybe not one maggot, but deal with it in a decent manner. But it just does not deal very much durable damage, and that really, really limits the HMG. And on top of that, it's got terrible ergonomics, pretty bad ammo economy, and a really slow stationary reload. So I'm okay with keeping those downsides because they make sense, but all it needs is more durable damage, and then suddenly I think it jumps up to moderately effective because it does kind of have a niche. And I think that would also make it better against the bots, specifically against Worst Riders, which is really what killed this weapon on the bot front. It used to be very solid against the bots, but even with all the changes to Worst Riders, I still think this is not a good pick. Because it still takes a lot of shots to the hip joints, because the hip joints are very, very durable, like 80%. So if you give this thing the durable damage it really deserves, then I think you can bump it up pretty easily. But it's very close to moderately effective. Kind of how like the laser cannon is very close to extremely effective. So those two are very similar in that respect. They're similar in a lot of ways actually, but that's a tangent I don't want to go into. The arc thrower. This one's tough because I love our lightning weapons, but it's a very big hesitation in between strictly inferior and underperforming. It feels wrong to put it next to the sterilizer, but it is a very close to strictly inferior. I'm going to leave it underperforming though, because the rate of fire on this thing was gutted at launch. It like absolutely gutted, because there was a tech you could do to speed up the rate of fire. It was like a little bit of a timing mini game where if you timed it right, you could fire faster than the gun should, quote unquote, be able to. And of course, that just could not stand. Arrowhead would not tolerate that for a second. So they nerfed it into the ground and gave it a couple token buffs in return, but nothing to even come close to making up for that. And of course, 2026 Helldivers, very different from launch Helldivers. So the arc thrower just has not kept up. So on top of the fact that it doesn't feel very fun to use because it's got a very janky charge up mechanic, I think, that it really doesn't need to have these days, I also think it is just not a super effective weapon. It's okay at chaff clear, but it loses a lot of damage with each arc it makes. So overall, it is vastly outperformed by something like the grenade launcher, which we're coming up to next, in terms of clearing chaff. And it's not that good against heavies because it doesn't really do that much damage. It can kind of stun them, not super effectively because the stun is very, very short and doesn't apply immediately a lot of the time. So overall, the arc thrower is just... it sacrifices so much for that infinite ammo that I really don't think it deserves a sacrifice. I think it really does need a little bit of a rework in order to be moderately effective. But I think all arc weapons really suffer also from unreliability, which is why I really want to place this in strictly inferior, or I kind of want to. I don't really want to, because what I would want to do is place this in extremely effective because I love arc weapons, but that would be dishonest and that just would be a lie. So it's unfortunate. I just think this thing really needs more love than it currently has. I don't even know how to fix it. The bare minimum, you need to fix the unreliability of arc weapons, and then maybe we can talk about a rework. But right now, the weapon just doesn't even work at a baseline all that well. I also think it could probably afford to not lose damage in between each arc, and then after that, we might be able to talk about a real weapon. But right now, this weapon is so out of whack in so many ways. It's honestly hard to talk about, or hard to even conceive of how to fix it, because there's just so many problems with it. But it's sad. Hopefully one day. Now, the grenade launcher, when it was heavy pen, easily strictly superior. But right now, I think it's extremely effective. Because I think it is probably still the best chaff clear support weapon we have. By quite a bit. Because it just has a really good AoE, it has a really good rate of fire, it's got good damage. Seriously, if you don't believe me, take this thing out on the bug front and try and clear a bug breach just by itself with this thing, and you will see what I mean. It is the destroyer of chaff. It will obliterate hordes and hordes and hordes and hordes of chaff. It's in a scary way. This thing is crazy against chaff. Which is fine because it's not good against heavies, right? I mean, that's why it was strictly superior, because it was the best chaff clear weapon and also really good against heavies when it was heavy pen. But right now, I do think this thing is just a cracked anti-chaff tool. Now, I don't use it very often because if you bring an anti-chaff support weapon, that means you have to run ultimatum and thermites, and that's just kind of boring, or ultimatum and giga grenades. It's kind of boring. I don't really like doing that often. But I do think having one person bringing this on the bug front, and honestly on the bot front and the squid front, it's still pretty dang good. If you're in like a stack and you can rely on your team to clear heavies, or if you just, bring thermites, ultimatum, and supply pack or something like that, this thing will just absolutely cleave through hordes of chaff forever. It's got an okay ammo economy if you know, don't waste your shots. You really don't need to rip and tear with this thing that often, because just a couple grenades is usually more than enough. So the ammo economy isn't the best, but it's good enough. So the grenade launcher, again, if you want a chaff clear, fuck the arc thrower, fuck the stalwart, fuck the laser cannon, fuck the medium machine gun, just bring the grenade launcher. Or the flamethrower. Both of these are really good at their jobs. And I'm okay with these being really good at their jobs because they do have pretty big downsides. Again, the grenade launcher completely useless against heavies, and the flamethrower has really short range compared to most other support weapons. So they do have weaknesses, which is why I'm not putting them as strictly superior, but they are extremely good at their jobs. There are still situations where you will want to bring other chaff clear weapons though, which is why they're not going up here again. Okay, so continuing on to the de-escalator. Now, the de-escalator actually had a really big glow up that not a lot of people realized. It's a very strange weapon that has a lot of flaws, but I wouldn't feel right placing it underperforming, because when it works, it's actually kind of crazy how good it can get. So let me explain that a little bit. The main buff that took it from what I would argue was underperforming to moderately effective was the reload rate, because it had a glacially slow reload rate before that just made it very, very subpar. I mean, obviously when it launched it was bugged, it could like instantly kill Bile Titans, that was crazy. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about after that was quote-unquote fixed. It was bad for a while because it's kind of unreliable, and it also had a very painful reload rate, which it did not deserve. It was one of the worst reload rates in the game, I'm pretty sure. And now that it doesn't have that, it's not bad, because as all arc weapons are, it is very unreliable, or very unpredictable especially, but unlike other arc weapons, the bullet at least goes where you shoot it, right? Because an arc weapon, sometimes you point right at an enemy, and you have a clear path to them, and then it just decides to arc into a bush off to your right, or a dead body in front of you, instead of going to the enemy you're hitting. But the arc grenade launcher will always go, like it shoots a grenade. However, when the grenade hits the target, a lot of different things can happen, which is kind of where this weapon's unreliability comes from. Sometimes this thing will insta-give a whole-ass alpha commander and every enemy around him and just obliterate him. Sometimes you will directly hit an alpha commander in the head and he will be more or less unharmed, and it won't arc to any enemies and it will do nothing. So it's kind of an RNG heavy weapon, which I don't think is the best place for it to be, but I do think it has a high enough success rate that it is still pretty dang good. Because when it works, oh boy, it works. And this weapon also has a huge advantage over the grenade launcher, even though I think it's a lot worse than the grenade launcher, obviously, which is why it's down here, not up here. But this thing doesn't friendly fire yourself at all. So you can shoot it right in front of you at a wall right next to you, and it will never kill you, even if you're not wearing arc-resistant armor. It will friendly fire teammates, so it's not super reliable at that, but it will never hurt you personally, which is one of the reasons why I think it's up here instead of down here, because the combination of a grenade that can be very effective, specifically against elites, it really outshines the grenade launcher. This thing is way better at killing things like stalkers and alpha commanders when it works than the grenade launcher is. Of course, the grenade launcher is still pretty damn good at that. It's also better against heavies. It can't really take out heavies by itself super effectively, but it can finish them off if they're wounded, or, go for Hulk visors and things like that. So overall, I do think the de-escalator is a pretty dang solid gun. It's just, you have to be willing to deal with that unreliability, which I know a lot of people won't be, and that's a completely understandable stance to have. But overall, I do think it is quite solid. If you used to hate this thing and you haven't used it in a long time, I really think it had such a big glow up. I do recommend you give it another shot, especially on the bug front, which is where I think it shines the best. No demo force though, which kind of sucks. Now the AMR, I want to put it extremely effective. I love this thing. I think it is the best weak point deleter in the game. It is very good against the squids because it can dump out a lot of DPS, a lot more than people, think, against things like flesh mobs, and it can snipe snitches, it can snipe overseers to the head decently effectively. The ergonomics are a little low, but not unusably low. It's not like the variable or the 1-2 or anything. So it's pretty good at that. It's really good against the bots. It's probably one of my favorite support weapons against the bots, because it is insane against a lot of their units. It is insane against Hulks. It one-taps into the visor if you're close enough. It's really good against War Striders. It 3-taps into the hip joint, which, you can pump out those 3 shots very quickly. It's really good against Devastators because it can headshot them, and even if it doesn't, it does plenty of damage to their main body. It's pretty good against, Berserkers. It's kind of good. It's great against gunships as well. This weapon does a lot. It is the diligence of support weapons, in that it does require a ton of skill to use effectively. Maybe not a ton, but it does require skill to use effectively. But the skill ceiling is like nearly infinite. This gun will always give you back what you put in. So if you're really, if you're having a really good aim day, then you're going to absolutely obliterate everything with the AMR. But of course, if you're not a good shot, then you're going to struggle a little bit with it, which I think is fine. Like, that's how precision weapons should be. But overall, this weapon had such a big glow up when they buffed the ammo economy and they buffed the damage a little bit. I even like it against the bugs, kinda. The bugs are very anti-off-meta. They hate off-meta weapons, but 2 AMR max to a Bile Titan is actually very achievable to get off quickly, and that takes it out. And 1 AMR mag to the back of a charger also takes them out very quickly. You can also take them out to the leg pretty quickly. So overall, I think this is a really solid weapon that you can use on any front and have good success with, as long as your aim is good. I love the AMR. But unfortunately, that segues into the railgun, which I think has fallen off quite a bit compared to the AMR, because the railgun has a much slower rate of fire. It has a charge up, which is significant because that does mean you can miss your shots while you're charging up. It's not click and shoot like the AMR is. You have to predict where the enemy's going to be in a half second, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but when it comes to hitting a precision weak point shot on an enemy that is probably sprinting right at you, that does make a difference. The anti-tank component of this thing is not really useful. It's not super useful because it doesn't do enough damage to really take advantage of it. You can still take out like a Bile Titan to like 3 shots to the head, or a charger, to the rear, but this is definitely nowhere close to the heyday railgun of launch that was bugged because of the PS5 or like some host bug, one of the millions this game has. But overall, I do think the railgun has fallen off quite a bit since then. It's still very good, but I really do think it is a bot weapon first and foremost, because it doesn't have nearly the DPS of the AMR. You can't mag dump a railgun because 1 shot per magazine. I guess you can mag dump it, but the mag dump is 1 shot. The anti-tank component, again, is not super useful. It can be, but it's really not like something I think about all that often when I use this thing. You're not going to kill a tank or a factory strider at a reasonable pace with this thing, or even a cannon turret. So overall, I do think the railgun needs a little bit of love. Personally, what I would do is I would just give it infinite pierce, which would be, that would make a lot of sense for a railgun to me, that the projectile goes so fast, it can go through an infinite amount of light and medium enemies, so that if you were to shoot this thing at a big pack of bugs, the railgun would just punch right through them, and all the way to the back until it hits a heavy, and then it's stopped by that. I think that would make it an interesting gun and set it apart from the AMR more. But otherwise, right now, I would probably pick the AMR almost every time. Even though I still do like the railgun, it is still very much an effective weapon that you can bring out. It's not completely overshadowed by the AMR, just mostly. Now, the Quasar, this is going to be controversial, but I do think it is moderately effective, not extremely effective. Because the Quasar is very good, but it is extremely limited in that the rate of fire is the rate of fire. There's no getting around it. It gets a little bit better on cold planets, but it is still a very slow charge up time, which you really need to have a lot of breathing room to get off, which can be difficult unless you're run diving or unless you have a very competent team keeping chaff off of you, which doesn't happen very often if you're playing with randos, or even if you're playing with people, sometimes situations just get chaotic. And it's got a really long cooldown time, so this thing isn't going to be able to snipe out a bunch of heavies that come out of a bug breach very quickly or come from a bot drop. You can take out 1, and then for the next 20 seconds, you gotta rely on either your team or other things to take out other heavies, and that is not always the best spot to be in. So the Quasar does have a very good niche. It is an incredible run diving weapon. It's probably one of the best run diving weapons because the cooldown doesn't matter when you're just never forced to fight enemies. But let's not talk about run diving because it doesn't matter what you bring. When you run dive, this thing is just better than others, but you can succeed with a sterilizer if you're run diving, you know, very easily. But the Quasar is very solid in that niche. So it's still a good support weapon. It still has a very important role in the arsenal, but the really slow charge up time and the really slow cooldown time does stop it from going any higher than B tier for me. I don't really like using it because of those factors, but I understand why people do. It is a very convenient and effective weapon. No nonsense, more or less. Continuing on, the Epoch, I gotta put it underperforming, I'm sorry. I know some people swear by this thing, I know some people love this thing, but it's got some crucial flaws that I cannot overlook. And the two biggest ones are going to be the ammo capacity and the reload rate. And these two flaws on their own absolutely kill the weapon for me. They just absolutely murder it. Because the slow ass stationary reload is just not something that you can take lightly in higher difficulties, because the enemies do not leave you alone on higher difficulties. And if the enemies are leaving you alone, that is because all the enemies are already dead, so it doesn't matter what support weapon you have in that case. If your entire team is killing everything with an orbital napalm barrage the instant it spawns, then sure, the Epoch's great, and the stationary reload doesn't matter. But in an actual stressful situation, like a flag mission, or just anywhere where you're getting slightly overwhelmed, certainly the stationary reload becomes a massive, massive, massive burden. Because it is just way too slow. Like, you look at the animation, honestly, it looks slowed down. It's kind of ridiculous. And then on top of that, you have the charge up time, which is pretty slow, and you have the extremely limited ammo economy, only 3 rounds per mag. So you have to reload it all the fucking time, which is very annoying, especially because a lot of enemies take 2 Epoch shots. So you fire 2 Epoch shots and then you only have 1 round left in the magazine, and that means you have to shoot an enemy once and then reload it for an eternity, and that reload is extremely difficult if you're taking out like a charger that's aggroed onto you. You're just not going to get a good window to reload it. There's a little bit of tech you can do with the reload and animation canceling, but even with that tech, the reload is still way too slow. So I'm fine with it having a stationary reload, I'm fine with it having a bad ammo economy, I'm fine with it having not much ammo per mag, but it cannot have all 3 at the same time, because that just kills the weapon, and more importantly for me, it kills the enjoyment of the weapon. But otherwise, I think it's moderately effective. If it didn't have that, I would put it in B tier, because it does have a little bit of chaff gear potential, and it does have a little bit of potential against certain enemies, like, I think specifically Roach Dragons is probably what it's the best against. But overall, it's still not very accurate, and it still has a really slow rate of fire, even if you were to improve the reload. So it really would not be that crazy, even if it had a much faster reload. But right now, the combination of the weapon just not being especially crazy powerful, just like it's just like a pretty good projectile, paired with a horrible reload and ammo economy, cannot bring this thing any higher than a C tier for me. Even though I know people love it, it's fine. It's just not for me. And I don't think I think it could be for me without ever becoming even close to overpowered. So that's why I think so I'm putting it this low. It's not just personal preference. But continuing on, the expendable anti-tank, I kind of want to put it in extremely effective, because it is really, really, really solid. I like it much better than the expendable than the Quasar, because not only is it more cooperative, but it's also snappier and has more player agency. So if you're spamming this on cooldown and getting eats everywhere, you will be flush with eats most of the time. So you will really have way more anti-tank potential than a Quasar, which is very limited. Like, let me give you an example. You're defending an objective, and you're calling in, you call in 3 eats, that's 6 eats you can shoot immediately if 6 heavy spawn at the same time. However, you're at the objective for the same amount of time with a Quasar, and 6 heavy spawn, you can still only kill 1 heavy. So the eats allow you to bank them up a little bit, which is quite nice. And you also get the Hell Pod on cooldown, and Hell Pods are actually kind of useful to close bug holes, tiny bug holes, things like that, destroy spawners, destroy structures. They're not bad. They're not that great at tracking heavies these days. I feel like they don't stick to heavies at all, which kind of sucks, because that was a really fun bit of skill expression, but at Arrowhead, we hate skill expression, of course. But the expendable anti-tank is really solid. It does have a pretty critical flaw, which would make me want to put it down here, and that is the amount of time in between selecting the weapon and being able to fire it is way too long. Because there's a stupid little fuck-ass animation where you gotta pull out the E and then flip up the little sight, and that takes like almost a second, and that is quite a long time to wait in a firefight when you need a heavy dead now. And I think that just makes the weapon feel awkward to use, but I don't think it makes it significantly worse. Because unlike the Quasar, the Quasar forces you to more or less stand still while you're charging it, which is a big downside. But the E, you just need to select it and you can keep sprinting away while you're selecting it. So you're not locked down, it's just a little bit of a time waster. Because once you do that flip up animation, you can fire it instantly. It's just, there is a window of time between selecting it and being able to fire it that is annoying. Still, not bad. The Commando. I love the Commando, it's one of my favorite support weapons, but the cooldown is just too long. It's just too long for what it is. It has slightly more damage per call-in than the Eats, but it has over double the cooldown, or nearly double the cooldown, so somewhere around double the cooldown, and I don't think that's fair at all. I think shave 20 to 30 seconds off the cooldown instantly becomes extremely effective, but right now, it is just an insanely long cooldown for what it gives you. And you can still get really good use out of it if your aim is good, because the rockets can be very efficient against a lot of different weak points, but it is kind of hard to aim them sometimes. And again, the cooldown is just way too long for what you get, so you can't really rely on this as a primary form of anti-tank. So I think it is much worse than Eats just because of the cooldown, and it really does not need to be. Still, this is one of my favorite support weapons. I think it's really cool and it's really fun to use. Okay, continuing on to the expendable napalm. Now, the expendable napalm is such a weird weapon. I really never know what to make of this, because when it works, it is insanely powerful, but it is really janky to get the proper spread of fire. It's very difficult to get that reliably, and I think there's a big problem in the delivery system, because it delivers to you two at the same time on a long cooldown. But the thing with the expendable napalm is that it is extremely rare that I want more than one. So I think I'm gonna have to put it moderately effective because of that. If it were changed to have one expendable napalm with half the cooldown per call-in, then I think it would bump up to extremely effective and be a very fun, interesting weapon. But right now, the combination of needing a very specific situation to really get the maximum value out of the napalm component, where you spread it out over a huge area, combined with the unreliability of ground fire effects, combined with the awkward delivery system where usually you have one wasted Eat or one wasted expendable napalm, or wasted in that you don't get optimal value out of it, leaves it as kind of a weird pick for me. So I don't love it completely, even though I don't think it's strictly that bad. There's definitely a place for it, but again, you make that change, and I think instantly extremely effective. And it's not even that much, it's not even a buff, it's just switching it around to be in a more convenient, effective package too, because you get the same amount of Eats, you just get them in a more convenient, efficient way. But moving on, the solo silo, I think, is moderately effective, because while it has a lot of raw power, and it has really good range, and is really good on certain missions like the command bunker especially, it's still pretty awkward to use and pretty slow to deploy on a long cooldown. So while it is good against like factory striders, Vox engines, things like that, the fact that you have to call it in and then run over and get the stupid little fucking laser pointer, and then use the laser pointer with a horrible sway it has and zero magnification, and then the instant you let go of the trigger, the laser pointer is dropped and you can't control the missile anymore. This thing has so much jank to it that cannot let me put it above moderately effective. But when it works, it does a lot of damage, and when it against objectives that it is good at, like you can complete a bunker mission for free with a solo silo. Just find a hill and then just laze, and you're done. It's that easy. So I would place it moderately effective because of that. Even though, again, the jank really does hold it back quite a bit. Man, I need a lot of sips of water, so much yapping. Oh my god, we're not even halfway through. I really regret doing this all in one go, but we're committed now, baby. Alright, the flag. Do I need to say more? I mean, like, the aggro mechanic is kind of cool, but it's not super useful either. It would be more useful to just have you shooting the enemies instead of drawing them away from your team, because drawing them away from your team isn't super useful, really. I mean, I don't know. If there were like a proper, I guess maybe you could do a really janky build with the shield and the flag and something like that and just be kind of a pseudo tank, but in Helldivers 2, the player character is so fucking fragile that having a taunt is usually not a good idea. It just means you're going to get killed really fast, and then the flag will go away. And on top of that, it's just a mediocre melee weapon that takes up a stratagem slot and a support weapon slot, and it makes it hard to aim in third person because the flag obstructs your view. Overall, this is just a complete meme weapon that is not good. I don't even think it's really worth spending much time on. Same with the chainsaw. It's kind of garbage. It would be fine if it was a primary. It does not have the power to warrant being a support weapon because it's really slow to kill heavies. It has a really janky hitbox. It swings pretty slowly, so it's not good against chaff. You can get interrupted out of it really easily. And the optimal scenario where you get in there and then you can hit a heavy and then, you know, just chain him down is pretty rare and pretty difficult to accomplish, and usually you will die as a result anyway. So it's a massive meme weapon, kind of sucks, unfortunate because it's cool. But overall, I would never recommend somebody to use this in good faith. I just think it's kind of garbage. Continuing on, Maxi Gun, it's got to be underperforming, I'm sorry. The fact that it locks you down even when you're not firing is just unacceptable. It's got crazy recoil, it's got crazy bad ergonomics, it's got crazy muzzle effects so you can't see what you're shooting at. It's really imprecise, and of course, again, this one struggles the most when it comes to like the inherent nerfs to projectile weapons because it doesn't have great durable damage. And it also just does not it doesn't really do anything all that interesting, because if you want just pure chaff clear, you're going to do better with the grenade launcher. If you want something that is good, a machine gun that's good against heavies, you're going to do better with the medium machine gun, or the heavy machine gun. And it doesn't really, it's not a good jack of all trades either, because it's not good against most heavies. It's kind of a jack of all trades on the squids, but even then, having to stand still to fire is such a massive detriment when there's so many flash mobs and footless. And the Maxi Gun just cannot shoot through 3 to 4 flash mobs before they reach you. It just can't. So overall, weird weapon. I think if it had stagger, it would become instantly B tier if it had enough stagger to stop warriors, and if it didn't lock you down after you stop shooting. I would also like the spin up window to be faster, or maybe even instant would be kind of cool, but right now, I would not recommend somebody to use this, even though I don't think it's unusably bad. Here it's like, this is trolling if you pick any of these, but this, you're not trolling if you pick the Maxi Gun, but I think you would be better off picking just about anything else, because it also needs a backpack slot, which is a big deal. I haven't been talking about backpacks too much because this is the first backpack weapon. Actually, I didn't realize they were all at the end, but backpack weapons are a big deal. Wait, is the, Belfed grenade launcher not on this list? Hold up. No, it is. It's just in a weird spot. Okay. This list is not oh, yeah, because these are the new stuff that was added later. Okay, so they were just tacked on at the end. That's fine. But backpack weapons have a big... I guess I'll talk about backpack weapons real quick while we're in the Maxi Gun. The fact that you have a backpack is a massive downside to a weapon because it really limits build flexibility. Because guard dogs and backpacks across the board are really, really, really good, and losing out on the option to bring one is a big deal. Because you can take the grenade launcher, for example, with no backpack, and that will be better than the Maxi Gun. But you can take the grenade launcher with the supply pack, which is a crazy strong build, or with a jump pack, or with a guard dog. And those two stratagems will do a lot of work for you, even though it's true stratagem investment. But oftentimes, backpacks are some of the strongest stratagems in the game, if you ask me. So, losing out on the ability to pick a backpack really requires a very strong support weapon to be worth it. And the Maxi Gun just isn't that, unfortunately. I think the Maxi Gun, unironically, would probably jump up to moderately effective if it didn't have a backpack. It would not even be overpowered because the Maxi Gun itself is not that strong, but maybe even to extremely effective. It would be a lot better if it did not have a backpack. But of course, like, that would be unrealistic, so we can't do that. Now, the autocannon. I love the autocannon. I can't put it higher than it moderately effective, I don't think, because the flak mode is crazy, crazy good, but the APHE mode is a little weak. It just does not do much durable damage, so it really does struggle against some of those tankier heavies, which means its role as a generalist is not as good as you may think. It is a shaft-tier weapon disguised as a generalist, really, is how I would describe the flak cannon, or the autocannon, but I call it the flak cannon these days because the flak mode is like 90% of the power in this weapon. Sure, the APHE can be useful against like some of the weaker heavies like Hulks and Harvesters, but even against Hulks, this thing kind of sucks against them because it takes 2 headshots or 2 visor shots, and it staggers them so much. It's actually really difficult to land that second shot within a reasonable time frame. So it is much weaker than the AMR when it comes to dealing with Hulks, and it is much weaker than the AMR when it comes to dealing with even War Striders, I think. So overall, the autocannon, it's a really cool weapon, and it's a weapon I love. It's one of my favorite weapons in the game, but as long as the APHE mode is as weak as it is, I cannot put it at extremely effective. I do think a slight buff to the APHE mode, and then it's like a perfect weapon. But right now, it really is a flak cannon. So when the flak mode is good, like on the squids, it's very powerful. This is one of the best squid support weapons, if you ask me, because it's also good against Harvesters, but the squids are a third of a faction, and we don't know if that's going to stay, true once it's a full faction. So I don't really want to consider the squid rankings completely in this tier list to future-proof it a little bit. But overall, I do think very solid pick. It's just the APHE mode needs to be just a little bit better. Now, the Wasp, this is a tough one, because the Wasp is good against the squids, but I'm going to have to put it in underperforming because it is so fuck-ass unreliable for 2 reasons. And there's a third reason why I think it's C. One is that one is that lock-ons just don't work very well in this game. They just don't. They are really unreliable, they get stopped by tiny objects, and a lot of the times you have a direct line of sight, you can hit them easily with a direct fire weapon, and the lock-on just refuses to trigger. And that is really upsetting, because then the weapon is essentially a very heavy paperweight that you spend a stratagem and a backpack slot on, and a support weapon slot, which is a big deal. 2, the fact that the missiles fucking leave the barrel sideways is so annoying, because sometimes the missile will just leave the barrel and fly straight into a wall that's like at a 45-degree angle from you. And then that's just a wasted shot and the enemy is still alive. And that's kind of a big deal, because you don't know which side the missile's going to come out. So sometimes you have a wall on your right side and you gamble to shoot a missile at like a flying overseer that's about to kill you, and you get unlucky, the missile flies out the right side, hits the wall, and then you die. So those 2 things make this really unreliable, even though it is statistically pretty decent. It does a lot of damage, it can clear things like flash mobs really well, comparably well to flak mode, it can clear flying overseers pretty well, but 2 more things actually are wrong with it. Is the next one is that it's got a minimum range, in that if an enemy is too close to you, and the minimum range is pretty far, it's like 10 to 15 meters, the missile just straight up will not hit them. And it's a big problem when one of the enemies this weapon is the best against is flesh mobs, who run you down forever and are more or less impossible to CC, except for some very special exceptions. That's a big problem, because if the flesh mob gets close to you, you are kind of fucked. Because you have to run away, run away, until you make enough distance from that flesh mob to actually be able to hit them. And it's a lot of time you're spending not fighting. So then you just start run diving. Of course, overpowered, yada yada, I won't get into that today, but that's another big downside. And then the artillery mode on this thing is fucking garbage. It is just a waste of ammunition. So it's not even worth talking about, if you ask me, because it just doesn't clear out enemies all that well. So if you made this thing more reliable by just improving lock-on mechanics and making the missiles leave the barrel in a logical way that isn't insane and RNG based, then I think it would be pretty decent immediately, and that weakness of the minimum range would be okay to deal with in exchange for an effective lock-on. And also I would give it a direct fire mode, because I think all lock-on weapons should have a direct fire mode. That's the reason why the pistol is so good, the missile pistol, is because it has a direct fire mode, so you're not locked into using only the guided mode. Because if the missile pistol only had the guided mode, it would straight up not be very good. It would be like okay, because it would still have utility against gunships and things like that, but you wouldn't be able to aim for weak points or take bug holes effectively or aim for spawners far away and things like that. So give this thing a unguided mode, I think it becomes a really good weapon. But right now, not that good. Now, the Airburst rocket launcher. I fucking hate this thing. I do. Just everything about it. I don't like using it. I don't like when other people in the lobby use it because I don't like using it because the reload is so slow. It's so janky. It's so unreliable. It just, there's a lot of tech to it and you can't get better with it. But overall, I think if you want to just shaft clear, the Airburst rocket launcher does nothing that you could not do with the flak cannon or with a grenade launcher. This is just a really awkward way of clearing chaff, if you ask me, because its really slow stationary reload is a big deal. So this thing is very flashy, it makes one big explosion, which is, whoa, that's so cool, but at the same time, you could achieve the same thing a single Airburst rocket launcher shot achieves with like 4 grenades from the grenade launcher, 4 or 5 grenades, like unironically, that is. You really, if you don't believe me, go do that, I promise you. Because most of the time, a lot of the damage is wasted on this thing, unless the enemies are like crazy packed together. But at that point, we have so many good red stratagems that you would probably want to use one of the red stratagems on those enemies, and then use your support weapon for more surgical applications. So this one I've definitely not played much with because I think it just doesn't suit my playstyle at all. So I admit I may be underrating it, but I really do think it's not very good. The station, at bare minimum, it needs a staged reload and a slightly faster stationary reload because it just doesn't really work that well right now, unfortunately. Now, the recoilless. I'm going to take a sip of water for this one because it's going to be a big topic. Now, of course, a lot of people would not even hesitate. They would put the recoilless rifle strictly superior. It's the best anti-tank in the game. I would disagree. And let me explain that. Because the recoilless rifle is really, really, really good. I will not say for a single second it is not one of the best support weapons in the game, because it does a very important job of taking out heavies, and it does it very, very, very well. But it has a lot of weaknesses that people don't really talk about. And that is, it is a backpack weapon with a stationary reload. That is a big deal. And there are a lot of times where a build is stronger with expendable anti-tanks or the Quasar and a backpack. So this isn't strictly superior to the other anti-tank options because of that stationary reload and because of that backpack. Because, again, there are a lot of arguments to take a non-backpack anti-tank weapon because you want a guard dog, or because you want a reward pack, or because you want a supply pack. So this thing is definitely not the end-all be-all that people make it out to be. I don't even think it's overpowered against maybe a couple enemies, maybe a little bit against tank. Well, tanks got buffed recently, so it's not even overpowered against tanks anymore. Maybe against factory striders a little bit, because hitting that eye weak point is a little too easy. But overall, the recoilless is really not overpowered. And the fact that people keep saying it is overpowered is another proof that I think people just don't understand balance in this game very well, because it's kind of hard to tell. It's a very chaotic game, and in teams where, you have enough people throwing sentries and stratagems out, it doesn't really matter what you do if you're run diving. Especially, it's just, the game's kind of easy at that point if you just are shitting out enough DPS to kill everything before it becomes a problem. But the recoilless really is not like the god weapon that people say it is. It is very, very good. It is one of the best support weapons in the game, but I would not put it in strictly superior. Honestly, I'm like, the more I go on, I think I'm gonna leave this, I might leave this here empty, but we shall see. Maybe not, actually, now that I think about it, there might be 1 or 2 things I might want to put in there. Okay, so continuing on to the spear. Now, the spear did receive a significant buff to its ammo economy recently, but this one is tough, because I still do think the spear is almost completely worse than the recoilless rifle in 9 out of 10 situations, but it does have a niche against Fox engines, and it is still a perfectly functional gun. It just doesn't do enough to set itself apart from the recoilless, because the recoilless is like the baseline, just point, shoot, enemy, dead. Very simple, very straightforward, very effective. And the spear is just, it accomplishes the same goal, but in a really convoluted way, because lock-on just does not work that well. And the extra damage is a dubious benefit against most enemies, because most enemies are better killed by aiming at a weak point, which you cannot really do with the spear. You can kind of finagle the, the lock-on and like move it around and like try and hit that weak point, but it is not even 25% as reliable as just aiming with a recoilless rifle. It's not a point and click. So unfortunately, I do think the spear is stuck to moderately effective. Pre-patch, it would have been underperforming, but post-patch, I think it is moderately effective. I still think, like all lock-on weapons, it needs a direct fire mode. Maybe not like a point and click like the recoilless to set it apart, but something like the, the Commando's guided mode, wherever I put it. Yeah, something like the Commando guided mode where you can guide the rocket directly. And I think suddenly the spear probably becomes a very decent side grade to the recoilless, which has a little bit less ammo for better long-range performance and a little bit more damage. And even then, I don't think it's a super interesting niche for the weapon. I kind of wish it just did something completely different and was a different gun, because right now I think these two are still too similar from a game design point of view. But I do think with a direct fire, then at least these two would be quite competitive. But right now, as long as it is a lock-on only, there's just too much jank with the lock-on to really go any higher than this. And the reload is slower on top of that, which is a big deal. Continuing on, C4, extremely effective if you have the hot swap keybind set up, because that one just makes the weapon work. If you don't have it, then it's underperforming, because swapping modes by holding the reload key and then switching to the other thing is so slow. It's really not very effective. But if you set up that keybind, I promise you it makes a world of difference with this weapon. This is one of the weapons I came around the most on just because of that. I used to not like it, and now it is one of my favorite support weapons in the entire game. It is really, really powerful, because it's really good against heavies. You get quite a lot of them. It's good for stealth. It's got pretty decent range. Not nearly as good as the rocket launchers, but still very, very serviceable, because most encounters in this game take place like short to medium range. It has a pretty good AoE, so it's actually effective at clearing out clumps of enemies on top of clearing out heavies. It's really good against spawners, because you can set them up on spawners and detonate them all at once without aggroing enemies. It's really good for stealth. It's really good on defense missions if you have a supply pack, or not a supply pack, but a source of supplies to yourself, like a supply FRV, or just a resupply that nobody else is using. Overall, really, really powerful, fun, and versatile weapon. They really knocked this one out of the park. I think it's just fantastic, and it's such a good time to use. There is still some jank, like with the fact that you need to reload your hand. It's really, really annoying. I still think having it be a detonate and a throw mode is kind of jank. It's kind of silly. The best suggestion I've heard from a commenter that I liked a lot was, you tap the button to throw it, and then you hold the button to detonate it. And I feel like that would work a lot better than what we have right now, and would be a very, interesting way of doing that without even needing the hotbind. And of course, like getting rid of the reload, because sometimes you want to throw a brick of C4 and your hand is empty and you need to manually press the reload key, pull out a brick of C4, and then throw it, and that can screw you over sometimes. And also, if they don't do the click and hold method, they keep it as weapon modes. This is true of all weapons with weapon modes, but there needs to be a prompt that pops up when you switch modes to tell you which mode you are in with the hotkey. Just like a tiny little like blurb of text close to the crosshair that says, detonate or throw or, total or volley for the variable and things like that. Just a little like notification so you know which mode you are on. Because unless you hold the reload key, which is slow and not really feasible in combat a lot of the time, you just don't know what mode you're in unless you remember it, and it's very easy to lose track of it because the game eats input sometimes and situations just get chaotic. So those two things, they're like 90% quality of life. Because this is a very powerful weapon. It does not need any buffs. As it is very, very good. But let's skip to the next melee weapon, or to the next support weapons in the later war bonds before going into backpacks. First is going to be the Breaching Hammer, and I like the Breaching Hammer a lot, but I do have to put it in underperforming, I think. It is by far the best melee weapon in the game, but I do think it is still flawed conceptually. Personally, I would just make this thing a primary, because we need an anti-tank primary, and having an anti-tank primary that forces you to get close to enemies and go into melee, I think would be a really interesting and fun way to balance an anti-tank primary. I think straight up you swap this thing over to the primary slot as a special weapon right now, and instantly it is a really cool weapon that needs no other changes. Because it's pretty cool. I mean, there's a little bit of jank with melee, but that's more melee problems than it is specifically hammer problems. But as a support weapon right now, I don't love it too much, because the fundamental flaw of melee support weapons, if you ask me, is that you can lose them. And when you're doing melee, that is a very risky profession. You die a lot when you're doing melee, because you have to run into close ranges with enemies that can insta-kill you and insta-ragdoll you, and you also have to run past all the other enemies to get to that problematic heavy, so there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you use this weapon. And if you die, since it's a support weapon, you lose it. And you lose it usually in the middle of a bunch of dangerous enemies, because that's where you want to be with the hammer. So it is so punishing that melee weapons are support weapons, which is why I don't think support weapons should ever, or melee weapons should ever be support weapons. I think all melee weapons should be primaries. And even that, like, they would still be kind of mid as primaries, but they would be a lot better than the support weapons that take up a stratagem slot. But if you want to keep it as a support weapon, which you really shouldn't, I very strongly advise against that, at least give it more ammo, because it's got a very restrictive ammo economy for what it is. Only 7 charges for a melee weapon like this is just not reasonable. Because, like, what, you get 6 recoilless shots, and sure, that is a backpack weapon, but this is a melee weapon. It's so high risk to actually take out a heavy at all, and it doesn't even one-shot a lot of heavies. Like, for War Striders, you need to hit them twice. For, fucking what you call them, Factory Striders, you need to hit them like 4 to 5 times. Like, the ammo economy on this thing is just not... It's too restrictive for the cost of admission. So either you lower the cost of admission, or at the bare minimum, you vastly improve the ammo economy. But again, like, these weapons being primaries would be so cool and really improve, like, build variety, and be a very cool way of introducing anti-heavy and anti-tank weapons into the primary slot with appropriate limitations. But unfortunately, I don't know why we just need as much support weapon blue as possible, because this is by far the biggest stratagem category, right? I mean, like, you compare it, you see how many blue stratagems there are compared to how few red stratagems and green stratagems there are. I mean, not a single red stratagem has been added after launch except for Orbital Napalm, and very few green stratagems have been added. Oh, a couple actually. This has been added, this one's been added, and these 2 have been added, and so this one. So actually quite a few green stratagems have been added, but red stratagems have stayed more or less the same since launch. Meanwhile, every war bond these days feels like it has at least 2 to 3 blue stratagem. Well, at least 2 blue stratagems. That's the most prominent category. But I don't think it needs to be that way. I think this would be a great way to cut down on the bloat, because I think a lot of these weapons could, well, not a lot. These 3 weapons here could all be made primaries right now, and still, like, this one would be balanced as a primary, these 3 would still be kind of weak as primaries. Maybe this one would be kind of balanced as a primary, I have to see. But these 2 would still be very weak primaries, and they're extremely weak support weapons, unfortunately. But enough about that, let's keep going. The Leveler is, I'd say, moderately effective. It's kind of a weird weapon, but it does have a niche, in that it is really good against Factory Striders, is really good against Vox engines, and it has a lot of AoE, so it can clear out a pretty big pack of enemies, but it's still kind of a strange weapon. It looks like it should have more demo force than it does. I'm not saying it should, because I don't want, you know, stratagem jammers to become a joke again, like they were during the Ultimate 50 demo force ultimatum days, but I don't know, there's always been something about the Leveler that irks me, and I'm not quite sure why. I never could put it into thoughts, or into words. I do think it has some unreliability issues, like the fact that you need to headshot a Battle Titan to kill it is fucking insane for how big of an investment this is and how long of a cooldown it has. Like, it should just be able to body shot Bile Titans, I'm sorry. And at that point, I think it'd be an okay-ish weapon. I don't think it's bad, I think it's just a little awkward. So I'm really not sure how to change it, because making it more powerful, I don't think would be the right way. But I'm not sure how you can make it less awkward, again, aside from that Bile Titan fix. So, I don't know. It's still a decent weapon. It still has a niche. I would put it in a comfortable B tier. Now, moving on, three more support weapons. Okay, so we have the Belfed Grenade Launcher, Underperformer. I don't think it's strictly inferior, because it's not nearly as bad as any of these three, but it is pretty bad. Because it does no damage. It does no damage. 150 per shot with a tiny AoE. It can't even one-shot a Voteless. It can't. And it's not even, it consumes so much ammo to do anything because it does no damage. This is just a really ill-conceived weapon, and I think it needs a pretty substantial rework. It could be fixed with numerical buffs, but I think you could do something more interesting with this weapon than what it is, and I've advocated for this, and that is turning it into a heavy bolter style weapon, where instead of firing just pure area of effect grenades like the grenade launcher, instead it fires projectiles that fly a lot faster and go a lot further than what they do now, and do direct damage on top of explosive damage. And maybe the direct damage is heavy pen and the explosive damage is medium pen, or something like that, to not make it like as crazy as a heavy pen grenade launcher was, but just something to make this weapon more interesting than just a worse grenade launcher. Because right now, either it's going to be a worse grenade launcher or it's going to be a better grenade launcher, because these two are very similar weapons. It's just one is really good and one is kind of bad. And I think that is just an impasse you cannot finagle your way out of. One of these is going to have to be stronger than the other, and that's going to be that's just not a good way to balance these things. They're not really great side grades. I mean, it would need to be, like, if it were more powerful than the grenade launcher, at least that would make sense, because it's a backpack weapon, and again, backpack weapons are a big investment, because you lose out on all these crazy backpacks. But specifically, I think if you turn it into that heavy bolter niche, where it does like 150-ish direct damage, maybe 200 direct damage, and then like an explosion that's 100 with a small-ish radius with a high projectile velocity, I think suddenly this becomes a really cool and interesting weapon. You need to tweak the numbers around. Don't take those numbers for like those are just off the top of my head. But I really think you could turn this into a very fun, cool, heavy bolter style weapon if you did that. Because it's fun to shoot, but it's just so anemic that there's not much reason to use it right now. It's okay against certain targets. Wow, that's crazy thunderstorm. It's okay against certain targets, like flesh mobs especially, it does pretty good against. And overall, it's the best against the squids, but the combination of a horrendously bad ammo economy and just very low damage stop this thing from going any higher than C, unfortunately. But move on. Let's move on. Oh wait, thunderstorm. I really hope I don't lose power in the middle of this. That would suck. So let's get a move on. But continuing on, the Cremator, extremely effective. This is an awesome support weapon, guys. I love this thing. It is exactly what a backpack support weapon should be. Because, like, look, we have 3 support backpack weapons I would absolutely place up here without hesitation, because they actually are powerful enough to merit losing out on the option to have a backpack. And I think actually the Cremator and the Flamethrower are pretty well balanced, because the Flamethrower benefits a lot from like a ward pack or something like that, or even a guard dog to watch your flanks, but the Cremator just has so much raw power and range and damage that suddenly, yeah, the backpack is absolutely a worthy trade-off, but it's not so much more powerful that you never want to use the Flamethrower or the Torture. So I think they nailed the Cremator. I think this is one of the weapons, maybe one of the only weapons I can think off the top of my head that Arrowhead absolutely fucking knocked it out of the park immediately, and it doesn't need any changes. It is just fucking fun and good and cracked and not overpowered at all, because it still has short range and you still need to expose yourself to danger quite a bit to use it effectively, so it's not even close to overpowered, and again, you do lose out that backpack slot. So this weapon, really masterclass, fantastic work, whoever designed and balanced this thing. This is one of the weapons, again, I think Arrowhead has just gotten right straight out of the gate. If they ever ruin it, I will be so sad, because that would be just the ultimate self-sabotage. because this is such a good weapon. It is really fun to use on top of being really good, and that's rare. But let's continue on. The expendable MG. I'd say, honestly, extremely effective. I think it is a little bit better than the Stalwart because the expendable MG has that 20 stagger value, which makes a big difference. I do think there are situations in which the Stalwart is better, like on the Squids, where 20 stagger doesn't matter that much, but overall, that 20 stagger makes this actually really solid on the bug front, and it also makes it solid against the Cyborgs. I want to do a video on that, but Takibo beat me to it. Maybe I'll still do it, but that 20 stagger lets it crowd control some very dangerous enemies by stopping them in their tracks. And honestly, that should be the niche of war machine guns, is to be have a little bit of crowd control through stagger. I think that would improve all of them by quite a bit, but this is why I think this weapon is particularly good. And it's also good because you get so fucking many of them that it's a really cooperative weapon, because you get more of them than you can use, you share with your team, and that's just multiple people shooting a very solid weapon. So if you have somebody with like an anti-tank weapon like the recoilless, they can just pick up one of your extra machine guns and help clear chaff until a heavy shows up. They pick up their recoilless, take out the heavy, and go right back to chaff clear. So this is a very solid weapon. Another one that I think Arrowhead knocked out of the park. They've been doing a good job with support weapons recently. There's some stinkers in there, like this guy, and kind of the hammer's at least really cool and fun, so I don't want to call it a stinker, but the BFGL is absolutely a stinker. But overall, they've been doing a damn good job with support weapons recently. We'll see the next War Bomb pans out, but these two are really well designed and fun. But anyway, oh my god, that is finally all the support weapons. So now we only have the backpacks and the vehicles to work through. So let's go over the backpacks. Now this is where the list is going to get bloated more towards the top, because I think we have a lot of really good backpacks. I think it is honestly one of the strongest categories we have, which kind of sucks for the backpacks that are bad, because they are competing against some absolute goats. So let's get right into it before my power cuts out. The Flame Dog, extremely effective immediately. It's just a flamethrower without the weaknesses of a flamethrower, which is a high risk to the user, because the guard dog is the one that gets close to the enemies, so you don't need to put yourself in harm's way, and it does really good damage against heavies. It clears chaff really well. It's got a really good ammo economy. It's just very powerful across the board. It will take a bad primary and turn it into a good primary just because of how much work it does. So that's why, you know, when a lot of people tell you, hey, this primary is overpowered, and you see them using a guard dog, that's why you should scratch your chin and be like, how much is the guard dog really doing here compared to, or how much is the primary doing compared to the guard dog? Because odds are it's the guard dog that's doing the heavy lifting for that mission. But it pairs really nicely with crowd control stratagem or crowd control primaries like the Liberator Concussive, because they actually synergize with each other. It's not the Flame Dog doing 90% of the work and then the bad primary you pick doing 10%. The Liberator Concussive is doing a very important job of keeping enemies from killing you, and then the Flame Dog is doing a very important job of killing the enemies. So those two work together. It's not bringing one thing because one option is just too weak to stand on its own. It's two things being synergistic, and that's pretty cool. So the Flame Dog's really powerful. And same with the Gas Dog. People say the Flame Dog or power crept the Gas Dog. I disagree. I think the Gas Dog still has a very solid place because the Gas Dog is smart. It does not have the sheer brute force of the Flame Dog, but the Gas Dog is smart because it spreads out that gas effect over a ton of enemies. So the Gas Dog is way more effective at crowd control because gas is much better at crowd control than even buffed flamethrowers are now that they have crowd control. But it's also better against chaff because it will go around and pick off a bunch of isolated chaff units. While the Flame Dog just sits there and lasers one guy or flames one guy for a while, the Gas Dog just pops smoke or pops gas on one guy, moves on to the next guy, moves on to the next guy, and he will just spread the Gas Dog across so many enemies. So the Gas Dog is fantastic just because of that. Really good backpack, absolutely not power crept. These two are very comparably powerful. Though maybe the Hot Dog is a bit more versatile just because of the raw killing power, the Gas Dog is absolutely not to be underestimated. Okay, another sip of water before the power outage. Lots of sips of water today, but a lot of yapping as well. Now, the Laser Dog. I hate this thing. I really do. I hate it. It is stupid. It is stinky. It is... No, okay. Let me be fair. The laser dog at some point was... I don't remember where I saw this, but this was the best way to describe it. It probably was a comment. It was lobotomized. Because at launch, it used to be pretty goddamn accurate and pretty goddamn snappy. And at some point, it got nerfed, and it is no longer snappy and responsive. Because if you pay attention to what the laser dog is doing, like just go watch somebody playing with the laser dog and only look at what the laser dog is doing, it easily spends a third to half of its time missing or shooting targets it cannot damage. It just waves the laser around wildly without hitting anything. It shoots at the floor in front of enemies, it shoots behind enemies, it shoots over enemies, it shoots to the side of enemies, it shoots everything but enemies. And then on top of that, it doesn't do that much damage. It does some of the worst DPS in the game, actually. 200 DPS. The dagger does 250. The Liberator does like 800 to 900. This thing does a quarter of the damage of the Liberator, almost. And the Fire Dot, it doesn't know how to use it because it is stupid. It is a stupid guard dog. Because lasers, as we know, as most people have figured out by now, are best used to spread the Fire Dot on a bunch of enemies, or to laser weak points, one or the other. And the laser dog does neither. It doesn't hit weak points and it does not spread the Fire Dot. So it uses the laser in the worst possible way, which is why I think it is probably the worst guard dog. There's competition, but it is one of the worst guard dogs. I really think this guy he needs a lot of love. And I know people like him, lasers are cool, and it's not a bad stratagem. It's a very, like, anything here is totally usable, and you can absolutely have a good time with it. But like everything else in this category, I think it is weaker than it reasonably should be, and could benefit from a minor buff. I would make it smarter, personally, or at least snappier and more responsive. Maybe it being super smart and spreading the Fire Dot across all enemies would make it crazy overpowered. That's possible, so maybe not do that. But at least have it be accurate and hit the target reliably that it wants to damage, and be smart enough to not waste time on, targets it cannot damage, which is most of them, because it's light pen. Maybe even give it medium pen. Honestly, give it medium pen, and suddenly it becomes way better. But right now, it is just not it, Chief. But let's move on. The Gun Dog. I honestly put the Gun Dog in moderately effective. Maybe even... No, it's not as good as these, but it is pretty good. It is very solid against the Appropriators and the Squids overall, especially, because it is very smart and snappy and responsive. And it does way more DPS than the Laser Dog, because this thing will shred Overseers, especially Flying Overseers, and it will headshot Voteless, and it'll even do okay-ish damage against Flesh Mobs. But overall, the Gun Dog is probably the snappiest and highest ergonomic guard dog. It will track targets really well. It will adjust to new targets really effectively. It won't waste nearly as much time or ammo. Well, I guess it doesn't waste ammo, but not nearly as much time shooting things it cannot damage because it has medium pen, so it can damage a lot more things to the main body than the laser dog can. And overall, it is just so much more effective than the laser dog. Just never honestly, always bring the Gun Dog over the laser dog. I really think there's extremely little reason to ever bring this guy out over the Gun Dog. Maybe on night missions where it's really dark, the laser dog helps you see a little bit better, but this guy does less friendly fire, he does more damage, he's smarter, he's more accurate, just absolutely mogs the laser dog in every capacity. And they're both free, so why would you ever pick this guy unless you're doing like a meme all laser build, which is fine. Those are fun. There's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of raw like viability and power, just a direct upgrade at this point. Funny how that completely swapped around at launch, where it was just the opposite. This sucked and this was really good. But let's move on to the K9. Now the K9 is... the K9 is so tough to talk about because statistically, it is decently powerful. It's a little dumb, it gets a little confused sometimes, but it is usually pretty efficient, and it usually does a pretty good job of clearing big groups of chaff, and even doing a lot of damage to elite enemies like Alpha Commanders and Hive Guards. But I want to place it in Strictly Inferior just because I hate it, but I'm going to place it in Underperforming, because the friendly fire risk on the K9 is just unacceptable. Like, it is kind of griefing to bring this to teams. I know people swear by it. I know if you stay away from your team the entire mission and you're super diligent with putting away the canine every time a teammate gets close to you, it can work in teams, but I've yet to run into a player that does that, by the way. I'm sure a lot of those players would claim that they do that, but they don't put the guard dog away fast enough, and it always ends up team killing. Always. And that is just not acceptable for what it does. I think it's just a shitty way to balance the stratagem too. Have it be like a negative experience for your teammates when you bring it to balance it, quote unquote. Like the mortar sentry, for example, is another one of those stratagems, or anti-personnel mines or incendiary mines and things like that. I think it's a shitty way to balance stratagems, because if people just won't care, they'll bring it and team kill gleefully sometimes. And this is a soft grief stratagem, that's why I can't put it any higher. I do think it is more power. In terms of power, if you're playing solo and have arc resist on, I would put it moderately effective, but that's too many. You're doing too much work for something that is just not as good as the other guard dogs in my mind, because these are all very competitive and these two are just not really. Now let's move on. The jump pack, I'm going to say extremely effective because of run diving. It's extremely, if you don't run dive, I'd say it's moderately effective, because having that positional advantage is really important, especially on the bugs, because making distance from the bugs makes a huge difference in being able to survive or not. But if you run dive, this thing will just let you complete missions for free. It really does, because it makes you so fast and so mobile and so evasive, enemies will never fucking catch you if you're in light armor. And if enemies never catch you, then they despawn, and you don't have to fight anybody. So that makes it crazy, crazy overpowered in that sense. But really, that's a problem with run diving enemy mechanics, not with the jump pack. Nerfing the jump pack would not fix run diving. Do not misconstrue what I just said. But overall, very effective if you run dive, and pretty fucking good still, even if you don't. Because you can also get high ground with this thing. And high ground is so powerful that the devs have decided to fucking ruin help odds and stratagem reliability just to nerf it. And are going to take like upwards of 8 months to have an elite task force to fix it. So that's how good high ground is. It is very useful. So this thing is very decent. Now the hover pack, I know what I just said about high ground being really powerful is still true for the hover pack, but it's just too janky otherwise. Like if you can't get that high ground position, it's good, but it recharges so slowly and it leaves you so fucking vulnerable to enemies when you are dropping, and you also have so little control over it, so that you can't turn it off when you want to stop using it and want to come back down to the ground. You have to drop it, which is usually not a good idea because it goes flying, like, and you lose it more or less, and you also take a bunch of fall damage and get stunned, which gets you killed. So overall, the hover pack, I think, is just too janky to go any higher than underperforming. I do think it does have utility, like the high ground is really good, but overall, I don't know. Yeah, I can't place it any higher than this, I don't think. High ground is good, but you can get high ground with the jump pack, and this, it's just, if you had more control over it, and maybe more mobility in the air, I think it would be very solid. But as it is right now, I think it is one of the weaker backpacks in a very strong, again, category. So moving on, the warp pack. Again, extremely effective because it is a very good run diving tool. It can be used defensively to do damage to enemies, which is very powerful. It recharges stupid fast. It lets you dodge and avoid so many enemies. So again, if you're an evasive player and you're run diving a lot, or just like being mobile, this is very, very powerful. These two, I think, are very comparable, actually. I used to think the warp pack was just better, but I do think they are very comparable. Both really, really good stratagems. Of course, this lets you, enter bunkers by yourself, which is a big plus, but I don't really want to consider it in terms of this, because that is like a very niche application that's not, relevant to normal gameplay. That's just for farming. But that's still something worth considering. Absolutely the standout item of its entire warband. Okay, another sip of water, and let's keep moving. The gulp of water, more like. Damn, if I weren't lazy, I would go and cut out all the sips of water, but this is going to be like a 2-hour video. I don't want to scrub through that. Listen, I'm lazy. Okay, I think that's been established, but I think I have a pretty good grasp on at least what makes things good and how to improve them, especially on these, which is why I yap so much. But let's keep going. The supply pack. I mean, is this any surprise? The supply pack is so good because it solves so many problems that the game has. The game loves balancing weapons by giving them shitty ammo economies. This instantly fixes that. The game loves taxing the shit out of your stims and just constantly doing shit damage that you have to squeeze stims on. The supply pack fixes that. The game loves to fucking require you to spam grenades or demolition force, especially on the bug front. The supply pack fixes that. It's really good as a support tool because you can keep your team alive. You double your supply economy because you get the supply box when you resupply and then also a backpack box. And it lets you just stim through encounters really effectively because stims make you more or less immortal for a couple seconds. It is so good and it wears so many hats and does so many things. And I know a lot of people want to nerf it. I don't think that's the right play. I think right now, the amount of things that are bad to mediocre does more harm to the game than one thing being really good. That's also why I don't think we should nerf the crossbow right now, and we should instead focus on buffing all the things that are underperforming. But the supply pack is crazy. And I think it would be less crazy if the supply economy was a bit better. Like, if there were less stim taxes in the game and less weapons had shitty ammo economies, I think that would make the supply pack a lot less meta. But as it is right now, this is just like one of the best stratagems in the game, like bar none. This is the orbital napalm barrage of blue stratagems, low key. That's how crazy it is. Because again, it's mandatory for cave missions more or less. It is really good for commando missions. It's really good in normal missions. It's really good for flag missions. It's really good everywhere because being able to spam grenades and spam ultimatums and spam all these powerful things is incredibly good. And being able to stim through problems is also incredibly good. So I don't know what to do with this thing. I think we should talk about it after everything else is in a better state, and maybe we can talk about nerfing the supply pack. But nerfing it right now would be a huge mistake, because it really does make the game more fun to play with a lot of weapons that are just kind of bad or like have really bad ammo economies that they don't need to have, like the Knight or the Breaker. These would become unusable if well, not unusable, but much worse if the supply pack was really like heavily nerfed. So I don't know. I don't think you can nerf this right now without making the game less fun, but you could buff a lot of these while making the game more fun. So in a perfectly balanced game, I don't think this would need to be as strong as it is, but in a game as unbalanced as Helldivers 2, I think you do need a couple crutches here and there just to prop up the other weaker stuff and have more fun builds, is how I would envision this thing. It's not like the Orbital Napalm Barrage where it's just brain dead easy and not interesting, because it is interesting. Like, have you ever played with a supply pack and dynamite spam? That shit is fun, dude. Or with grenades, or even like bad grenades, like pineapple grenade spam. It's just really fun to use it, or to use the Knight and just spray and pray like crazy the entire mission. It's a really fun, like, enabler for builds, so that's why I don't want to see it nerfed. But let's move on. The Directional Shield. Underperforming. Not only does it absolutely like need rock solid to be functional on the only front I would ever take it on, the bots, because ragdoll is a huge problem, but it also takes up a backpack slot, and when it's competing with guard dogs and mobility tools and supply packs, which are all insanely good options, why the fuck would you ever take the shield outside of just for fun? And that's fine, just for fun. There's nothing wrong with just for fun, but at the same time, there's a couple things you could change to this thing to make it way better and way more fun, if you ask me. And first of all would be the ability to block ragdoll. It should just behave as it is right now when you're wearing rock solid without needing to wear rock solid, which is the Python commando armor that reduces ragdoll. It should just function like that out of the gate. And personally, I would just make this thing either a primary or a secondary, because it is so tiny, it is silly that it takes up a backpack slot. Low-key, I don't know which one I would do for, because there's like, that would be a tough decision. I mean, ideally, you could pick it either as a primary or secondary, so you could use it with either... No, wait, I remember. I had this idea. I would make this a secondary, and I would make the Ballistic Shield a primary. And that's how I would balance these things, because they are not worth a backpack slot, and they are not worth a stratagem slot. Either that, or you create like an extra slot that we don't have right now, like a utility slot, which would not take up your backpack. And then suddenly I think it becomes very decent. But as it is right now, not really worth using. Even though it's cool, I love shields. I think an energy shield has a ton of potential to be a fun stratagem. Right now is just not it. Now, the shield bubble backpack. I think straight up this is still an A tier. It got nerfed so hard at launch, but it is still so good on the bot front. It is so fucking good on the bot front. And it's good mostly because it just cuts down on all the really annoying things about the bot front, which is ragdoll spam and insta-kills. And the shield helps with that a lot. It also really helps with stim taxes. This really helps your stim economy. Not as much as the supply pack, of course, but second best. So overall, this keeps you alive very, very well. It does have a pretty big hitbox, so it breaks sometimes when you really would like it not to, because enemies miss you and they still break the shield. But overall, when it works, it will absolutely save your life over and over and over and over again. Very good stratagem. People underrate it these days, but I still think it's one of the better ones. The ballistic shield, and it's also good against squids. Even the bugs, it's not bad against. Probably the worst against the bugs, but against the squids, it's actually very decent. I should use it more low-key on the squids. But moving on. The ballistic shield, very similar boat to the directional shield, where it's just having something that is purely defensive and not even as good as defense as it should be, because you still get ragdolled out of the shield animation. And sacrificing either a better ammo economy or more DPS or more mobility or more survivability is just not worth it. Still, it's not as good as survivability as this is, because it can't block shot attacks from your back, so it's not bad. But at the same time, you're just using a stratagem slot and a backpack slot, which are big investments, for a big hunk of metal that doesn't really do that much for you. So I really wish this thing had a special function to it, like, say, the Arbitas shield, like the Arbitas shield in Shockmaw and Darktide, where you can do like a flash stun in front of you on a cooldown, and then that would bump it up, but it needs to do something. I think maybe even like a thorn effect on the shield, where like it shoots out like a small arc of lightning that stuns enemies when they hit it in melee or something like that. Just an extra mechanic to it to make it more interesting than just a hunk of metal. Because a hunk of metal is not worth the huge investment that a backpack plus stratagem slot is, because that is one of the biggest investments in the game, because that is precluding you from getting the supply pack. Or again, I'm repeating myself a lot, but a lot of these things have the exact same problems. So I would also not hate it if it was made as a primary as it is right now. But honestly, I think I would rather just one of these either be made a secondary or primary, or ideally be able to take it in either slot, so you could choose if you want a one-handed primary or secondary to use with it. And then this becomes a more utility-oriented thing with, again, like a stun effect or a thorn effect or something to give it a little bit more sauce, because it just does not have the sauce right now. This shit is dry as hell. But moving on. The Hell Bomb, Portable Hell Bomb. I'd say it's extremely effective. It kills a bunch of enemies, it's got good cooldown, and it's got fantastic utility. It is really good against objectives, it's pretty good against outposts, it's really good against huge waves of enemies. Overall, the Portable Hell Bomb has a lot of niches it really shines in. It's kind of a niche pick because it's like an expendable backpack, but I think having one person with a Portable Hell Bomb on the team, on any faction, low-key, maybe the least on the bugs, because there's not many things on the bugs that require 50 demo force, but it's on the squids, on monolith missions, the Portable Hell Bomb is like Giga S tier. It's so good, because it lets you skip the hardest part of that mission, which is attacking the monolith, which is always very well defended. And it's also really good on the bonds, because it can take out stratagem jammers. And this thing is so good that it is one of the only like DLC Warbond stratagems that is given for free in a mission type with the Sporelong mission on Hive World. Honestly, I think this thing should not even be in a Warbond. It should just be base game, because it is so useful on so many cases. But, you know, 25 Warbonds and 24 Warbonds and counting, soon to be 25, and then 26 after the 40k Warbond. That's a battle we've lost, I think. But this thing is really good and has a ton of utility and power. Just like sipping water has a ton of utility and power. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice at a rapid pace. A very professional YouTuber, content creator, streamer, whatever the fuck. But continuing, the FRV. Now, the problem with the FRV, and all the FRVs, including the flame one, which we do not have, is the handling is kind of ass and it flips very easily. But the specific problem with this FRV, which is why we place it moderately effective, is that the HMG on it fucking sucks ass. For some reason, it is just a bog standard HMG support weapon, which makes no sense because it's mounted. Why does it have the same bad recoil as the HMG jet has, and really bad ergonomics, and the same ammo capacity? I think the HMG on this thing needs to be way stronger than it is right now. I would make it way more comparable to the mounted HMG on the back of the FRV. Maybe not as powerful as that one, but at least don't force me to reload every 2 seconds, and don't make the ergonomics really, really bad, and don't make the recoil really, really bad. Because the HMG on this thing is like more or less, it's not completely useless, but it's more of a liability. It's honestly more of a liability to have somebody in the gunner seat because they can fall out more easily when you're driving. So I never get in the gunner seat because of that. And it's also a liability when the FRV is parked because when somebody's in the gunner seat, they're drawing aggro to the FRV and getting it destroyed. So honestly, I would probably rather the FRV without an HMG. Like, that's how bad it is, because it is a downside if you have a clueless teammate who sits in it and draws aggro to the FRV, and it's too weak to be much of an upside. So, I don't know, don't use the HMG on this thing, which is a shame. It really does not need to be this weak. It could be much better and more fun. So I was correct, and the power did cut out, so now I have to get back into it later. I tried to recreate the tier list. I think I got it right. If anything's different from before, please don't accept this faulty tier list. Just look at the one that was before this segment if you want the official ranking. But again, I do think I got everything about right in replicating this. But anyway, let's keep going. Now, the Patriot Exosuit, I would put it in moderately effective because it is very decent at some things and it is worth bringing out sometimes, but I do think it is weaker than the best exosuits because while the MG has a pretty good ammo economy, or the minigun has a pretty good ammo economy, it is not the most accurate. And that does hold it back sometimes, because at longer ranges, it is difficult to hit your shots. It's not as stable, really, as you would think a, stationary minigun would be on a mech. It does have quite a bit of spread. And same with the missiles. The missiles, I've always really wanted them to have the commando guiding system because they aim really bizarrely. Since, they come out from different points in the missile pod, it is very difficult to hit a precision, shot like on a Bile Titan head that's moving, right? So even though the missiles aren't statistically bad, they are just hard to hit. And while the machine gun is also pretty good, it is also a little inaccurate. So I do think overall the Patriot is not the best exosuit, but it's still good. It's especially good against the squids because the machine gun is really good against all the squids, more or less. And then the missiles just, icing on top. It helps with flesh mobs, help with harvesters, can take out landed ships and things like that. So that's where it functions the best. And it's also really good specifically against Hive Lords. It's the best exosuit if you want to take those guys out, which is worth mentioning. Though maybe the breakthrough these days might be a little bit better as shredding through the main HP pool of a Hive Lord once you get rid of the armor plates, but I don't think it's better than the Patriot, because the Patriot does have the missile to take off the armor plate on top of the machine gun to actually damage the innards. So overall, the Patriot is still probably the best one to deal with Hive Lord specifically. Not a very important niche, it's not something you do often ever, but it is worth noticing. Now moving on to the Emancipator Exosuit, I think this guy might genuinely be the best exosuit in the game, because it's the one that's the most conducive to run diving, or the best at run diving, and run diving is the meta. And with the Emancipator Exosuit, you can kind of just run away from everything the entire time. You could do that with all the mechs, but what makes the Emancipator Exosuit so special is that the double autocannons are really, really good for objectives, and really, really good for closing bug holes and spawners and things like that, because you get so many shots from this guy. 200 autocannon rounds is not insignificant. So say on like a Spore mission or Spore Tower mission on a bug megacity, you can complete the entire mission in 30 seconds, well, like a 2 or 3 minutes with a single Emancipator exosuit, right? You can walk into Mega Nest and close every bug hole very easily, as long as you deal with the heavies appropriately, and don't try and fight a bug breach. But this exosuit is really good at things like that. When you don't want to fight enemies, you just want to run away and do objectives. Just kind of boring, but I still have to, you know, rate it fairly because it is very good at that, and that is a very powerful tool to have in your arsenal. But when it comes to actual direct combat, I don't think the Emancipator is the king there, because the ammo efficiency is not the best. You do tend to run out of autocannon rounds pretty quickly, especially if you're using it against heavies, because it flinches heavies a lot, so it's very difficult to hit the same weak point multiple times in a row. Like killing a Bile Titan with Emancipator is pretty annoying, or killing a Roche Dragon with Emancipator is really annoying because it pretty much has a seizure every time you shoot it. But overall, it's still a very powerful mech, and definitely the best one, just because it fits the current state of the meta the best. Oh wait, I did mess this up. There was supposed to be... where did I put the supply pack? Yes, here it is. Somehow I put it in the wrong slot, but that's fine. But continuing on. Let's do all the mechs and come back to the Bastion supply for V afterwards. For the Lumber, I think it's the weakest mech by quite a bit, because even though the Flamethrower has been fixed, quote-unquote, and does work better than it did before, it is still pretty bad. It doesn't have very much ammo, it doesn't do very much damage. Ground fire is still really unreliable, especially if you're not the host, and it's still unreliable if you are the host, so enemies can just walk through it and not care. And the hitbox still feels janky even after the fix. So the Flamethrower component of the Lumber is really not that good. When it should be, a Flamethrower on a mech should be very powerful, but it honestly feels weaker than any of the portable flamethrowers we have. It feels weaker than the support weapon flamethrowers, for sure. Weaker than the Flamethrower and the Cremator, which is kind of a strange thing for the Lumber to have. So I don't really know why it's like that. It's just a strange flamethrower that's not very good. But the anti-tank cannon is not bad. It is way easier to hit your shots with than the Patriot missiles. And it has, well, both of them have nearly infinite range because this has no drop-off. But the higher velocity on the anti-tank cannon makes it easier to hit shots on moving targets at long ranges. And the ammo economy is a bit better with the anti-tank cannon. So overall, that arm is pretty good. It's just the flamethrower is bad. Like, if we actually lived in the good timeline where we had mech customization, I would never put the flamethrower arm on any mech, but the anti-tank gun I would. So that should let you know my opinions about the Lumberer. It's being entirely held back by a very mediocre flamethrower, and that is half of its weaponry, which is a big deal. It's still not bad, you can still make it work, but I would almost always rather have the other mechs. Especially the Breakthrough, because this is my favorite mech. I really, really like the Breakthrough, because it feels like a mech that is designed to actually fight enemies, and that's fun. Unlike the Emancipator, which is designed to just cheese objectives and run away the entire time, the Breakthrough is all about getting in there, shooting fools with your shotgun, smacking them with a shield, and having a good time. And that's the kind of gameplay I enjoy. So the Breakthrough is really good on missions where you have to fight. So things like flag missions, defense missions, etc. Because not only is the shotgun very powerful, and it's good against heavies, chaff, everything more or less, but the shield bash is also super, super effective at both saving ammo and keeping yourself safe from a bunch of chaff that is close to you. So overall, the Breakthrough is the best direct combat mech, even though the bug where the arm clips through the shield and makes the shield die really quickly sometimes is infuriating and really needs to be fixed. The Breakthrough is still my favorite mech by quite a wide margin. And I think, again, if what you are looking for is to fight enemies with the mech, bring the Breakthrough. There's not much argument for the other ones. Well, the other ones aren't bad at fighting enemies, but the Breakthrough is like, that's what he does. You know, he's here to brawl. And I kind of wish the other mechs were designed a little bit more that way, but at least I have one. Alright, let's move on to the Bastion. We'll do this chronologically. Now, the Bastion, I have hot takes about the Bastion. People love it. People also hate it because I've seen the pick rates on the Helldive.live, which is a great website, by the way. It shows you more or less pretty accurate estimates of pick rates because they have really big sample pools, but the Bastion is not a popular stratagem, and I think it's not a popular stratagem not because it's too difficult to use or whatever. It just doesn't feel that fun, if you ask me. But let me start off with my personal bias here, so you guys can immediately disacknowledge my opinion if that's what you want to do and you love the Bastion. I'm giving you an olive branch right here. I used to play War Thunder. I fucking hated casemate tanks. I thought they were the least fun thing in the entire game. Despised piloting casemate tanks. So casemate tanks, if you don't know, they're the tanks that are built like the Bastion, where there's no turret, the gun just faces forward, has a pretty narrow angle to turn. I despise tanks like that. I don't think they're enjoyable at all. So that's my bias and why I don't like the Bastion. But I do think there are some more objective traits about the Bastion that really stop it from going any higher than this. And I think there's three. I think the first is that it handles like shit, which is a really big deal when you essentially aim with the driving. That the driver is the one who aims the gun more so than the gunner most of the time, because the driver has so much more control over where the tank is facing. So the fact that it can't instantly turn on a dime, there's an input delay when you try neutral steer, which again for not tank autists, neutral steering is when maybe I'm forgetting the term, so maybe I'm not even a tank autist anymore. But neutral steering is when you rotate the tank in place. And when you try to do that with the Bastion, there's a delay. So it's just so sluggish to respond to a new threat in a way that feels really dumb and artificial, because tanks like this can easily rotate instantly. There's no input delay. Like, that is a critical design flaw. And another part of the tank that I don't like is that the driver role is kind of boring, honestly. I know some people like it, but overall, the best way to play the driver is to just find a good position and then sit there and do nothing. And in a game that is as action-packed and as fun as Helldivers 2, I see all these other options to have fun and do something cool and interesting. Or I could be a glorified chauffeur and not even drive a fun vehicle to drive like the FRV, drive a big sluggish piece of shit, and then just sit there and let my gunner have fun. No, that's a bad design, I'm sorry. The driver should have a machine gun or at least something to do. I mean, personally, I wouldn't even have done a casemate tank in the first place. I think it's quite silly, but I think we're way past that at this point. But the driver role is a little boring. I know some people are going to like it because people like everything, right? But again, the pick rates don't lie. This is not a popular stratagem, and I'm trying to explain the reasons why I think so. And finally, the communication within the tank is pretty bad. And that is really due to one big factor, and that is the fact that the gunner does not have 360 vision. Even though, obviously he can't turn the cannon further than a certain degree angle. There's another problem if you're not using a microphone, which most random players do not. I wager even the majority of players do not use microphones unless they are in calls with their friends, which is fine. You'll have a good time with a Bastion in a call with your friends, but you will have a good time with whatever the fuck in a call with your friends, because that's how friends work. You can do anything with friends and have a good time, so that's not a good argument that the Bastion is fun with friends, because anything is, right? But that's another point. If you don't have a microphone, it is extremely annoying to tell your driver to face another way, because you do not have that extra angle of visibility. You can only see and ping, specifically, targets you can already shoot, which is a problem, because what you want to ping is targets that you cannot shoot, to let your gunner know, or your driver know, to face that direction. And you can't do that, because for some reason your line of sight is limited. So, the tank is just really awkwardly designed in so many ways, and I feel like it was so silly to make this a casemate tank. I know it was one in the first game. That is not a good reason to have it be that way in the second game. But Arrowhead also did not they didn't do the work to make this thing actually fun and enjoyable in Helldivers 2, if you ask me. Because this is something I've been noticing more and more that Arrowhead likes to do and has been doing for a long time, is that they just look at things that were in Helldivers 1 and then they just copy them over without even thinking at all about how they would be different in Helldivers 2. Because they're very different games with very different, mechanics and modes of engagement. So one of the mechanics I talked about in length on that was the enemy reinforcement system that was ported over thoughtlessly without really thinking, oh, our players can split up now, oh, it's in 3D, like, people are going to run away from enemies, there's going to be stealth. Like, they didn't really account for all those variables when they designed the reinforcement system, especially the fact that players can split up and are even encouraged to split up, which is definitely accidental, but what can you do? The Bastion's the same way. It was just like, okay, the tank was a casemate destroyer in Helldivers 1, so we're just going to do it that way again in Helldivers 2, without thinking about the fact that, you know, now you actually need to account for elevation and uneven terrain and all these different things that make a tank destroyer not really gel that well with the Helldivers 2 core gameplay loop. Because, again, if you played War Thunder or World of Tanks or any of these other games, you know the best way to use a casemate tank destroyer is sitting really far away from enemies, sitting still, doing nothing until somebody enters your line of sight, and then you snipe them. It's a sniper, essentially. It's a sniper of tanks. Because you're not reactive enough to drive in there and fight. It's not a light tank, it's not a heavy tank without a turret. It's you just sit back and do nothing and sit there. And in a game where you're constantly encouraged to keep moving and constantly encouraged to keep up with the pace of the mission because it's got a timer, and not sit still and not fight endlessly reinforcements, everything about the Bastion is just at complete odds with how you're intended to play Helldivers 2, or the best way to play Helldivers 2 right now. God knows how it's actually intended to be played at this point. But that's why I have a lot of thoughts on the Bastion. I do think it is very powerful if, again, you have that communication. It is a very powerful gun. It is a very powerful HMG as well. And it is also really good on defense missions, specifically the high value evac ones, because you don't even need a driver there. You just put it in a good spot and then just becomes a giga emplacement that is really tanky. But at the same time, I don't think that's a good place for the only armored fighting vehicle we have outside of the mechs. I think this thing could be so much cooler and so much more fun with some basic tweaks. I mean, I would prefer a whole rework because, again, my personal bias is I fucking hate casemate tanks. But even within the bounds of a casemate tank, this is needlessly janky and could be so much more fun and better. But right now, it's just, I don't want to use it ever, more or less. Even when I'm playing with viewers or playing with friends, I never think, oh boy, I want to use the Bastion. If I want a co-op vehicle, I'm going to go use an FRV, because FRVs, despite all their jank, they're fun. And I have a good time driving them, and I have a good time just being in them. And even if something goes wrong, it's funny. The Bastion, it's not funny, it's not enjoyable to drive, it's just kind of nothing. It's just kind of boring. And that's going to rage bait people, I don't really care. But moving on. The supply FRV, now, this is going to be controversial. Maybe not. I do think it is just strictly superior compared to the fast recon vehicle. I mean, this kind of tells you how bad the supply meta is these days. That the two stratagems I think are by far the best, or the ones that help with the supply economy. But the supply FRV specifically is here and strictly superior because it is just better than the fast recon vehicle. Because the FRV, I mentioned it earlier, but the HMG on this thing just kind of sucks ass. And this would be a different story if the HMG was actually good. If you just take the mounted HMG and put it on the back of the fast recon vehicle, then probably both of these I would move into A, extremely effective. But right now, the fact that this is down here is what's putting the supply FRV up here, or part of it. But also the supply FRV is just really, really good across the board. The supply economy, again, is horrible in Helldivers 2 right now. There's so many stim taxes, there's so many bad weapons with bad ammo economies that you really need more supplies for. And, of course, you can have selfish teammates grief and eat up all the supplies. And there's so many things that can go wrong with supplies in Helldivers 2. So any sort of insurance to help that supply economy makes a big, 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 big difference. And the supply FRV not only has that, the really good, boon to your supply economy, but it's also just an FRV, and FRVs are good. Because FRVs are fantastic for run diving. Or drive diving, I guess, but run diving's the term I'm going to stick with. Because you can just drive away from all your problems. And not only can you drive away from all your problems, but you just never have to fight patrols because you're faster than they are. You just drive past every enemy in between points of interest. You get out of the FRV and deal with whoever followed you, which is not that many enemies typically. Do your business and then get back in the FRV and leave. And that saves you, like, you can shave off 15 minutes off a mission, even when you're solo with an FRV, just because you get to skip all the bullshit in between encounters, which is really where the meat of, like, most of the combat happens. And another reason why I would like to move combat away from random breaches and more into objectives. But I talked in length about that in my mission redesign video, so you can go watch that one. But the supply FRV, I mean, has the boon of being a fast recon vehicle mixed with a supply pack, which is a really, really powerful thing. So I don't think the supply FRV should be nerfed. I do think it's just the FRV needs to be buffed and have a better machine gun. But the supply FRV, I really don't think it's that overpowered because so many things can still go wrong with it. It can flip really easily. The turret on the supply FRV is honestly a liability because it does so much friendly fire and eats up so many supplies if you try and keep it fed without really killing that many enemies, which is fine. This thing doesn't need to be a utility and damage powerhouse. It doesn't need a powerful turret. Just wish it did a little less friendly fire, honestly. But the supply FRV can also blow up, like, randomly. It also can't be resupplied like a supply pack can be when you grab supplies. So there's a lot of things about the supply FRV that stop it from being overpowered. But it is such a nice pairing with backpack support weapons, especially. Like, the supply FRV single-handedly makes things like the Belfast grenade launcher or the maxi gun way more viable because these have shitty ammo economies, less so the maxi gun these days, but especially the Belfast grenade launcher, and you can't mitigate that with a supply pack, but you can with a supply FRV. So these are still bad weapons. These are still not good weapons, even with the supply FRV, but they are much better weapons. So overall, I do think it is a really, really good stratagem, and it's honestly the coolest and most fun one Arrowhead has put out in a long time. Actually, they've had a couple good blue stratagems. They really know how to do their blue stratagems, which is obvious because you look at how many blue stratagems there are, and then, like, green and red stratagems don't even account. They don't even come close to matching the amount of blue stratagems. But anyway, let's do the outro. I'll zoom out so you can see the whole tier list in one go. I think everything should be in place, but if anything changed over the time skip because of the power outage, just go back and look at the old version. That's the one, that's the official one. I haven't changed my mind on any of these things since then. But overall, I do think blue stratagems are generally better balanced than most other weapon category or most other categories in this game. I think stratagems overall are better balanced than primaries, especially. Grenades are really poorly balanced, boosters are really poorly balanced, but blue stratagems I think are not bad. Like, anything up here, these three tiers are all like super viable and fun and decently designed. They have flaws, especially the ones down here, but you'll still have a good time and they will still do something cool and interesting and unique and do it well enough that you don't feel like you're throwing when you're bringing it. These guys, unfortunately, are, I mean, they're usable, but they fall so short of the mark. They really do need quite a bit of love, but you can still definitely have success with all of these. None of these are like unusably bad. This is the unusably bad tier, but all of these you can absolutely have a decent time and succeed in difficulty 10 mission, but the flaws they have are too significant for me to want to put them higher. And even if you can mitigate some of the flaws of these guys down here, they don't deserve that work. The amount of resources you put into mitigating the flaws, like say for the Arc Dog, if your entire team wears Arc Resist armor, sure, it gets a lot better, but then you have 4 people losing out on potentially a much better passive just to make the Arc Dog work, where you could have just taken a better Guard Dog and not needed to sacrifice a passive just to be able to survive this thing existing in your lobby, right? So you can put in work to make these things work better and be more fun, like rock solid with directional shield, things like that. But overall, they're just really not worth the effort unless you really want to. And you know, there are fun builds here, like Warp Pack, Breaching Hammer is a lot of fun. So these aren't in the worst place ever, but they really could be much, much better with some minor tweaks, most of them. Here, these guys, I don't even know what to say about them. But anyway, that's it for the extremely long-winded blue stratagem tier list. I really should have split this up into categories, but support weapons just make up the bulk of it. So it would have been kind of awkward to do, okay, I'm going to do support weapons, and then I'm going to do backpacks and vehicles. because there's not enough vehicles or backpacks to do separate tier lists. So this is how I paint down. But anyway, I hope this was enjoyable. I hope this was somewhat useful to sort out your thoughts. But regardless, again, I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you all in the next one.